In the rest of the news, if New Hampshire will be anything like Iowa, then expect a lot of campaign cash to be dumped into the Granite State. Recapping what was spent in Iowa, Rick Perry dished out over $6 million in the state, translating to about $480 per vote he received. Not exactly money well spent. Romney spent over $4.5 million, about $156 for each vote. Ron Paul spent nearly $3 million, and Gingrich nearly $1.5 million. But that's only spending by each candidate, not including spending by each candidate's super PAC, corporate, front, affiliated, unaffiliated group, whatever it may be. According to research from the Center for Public Integrity, super PACs spent nearly $13 million in December alone, mostly on negative TV and radio ads. Romney's super PAC made up the bulk of that spending, pouring $4.5 million just into anti-Gingrich ads. It apparently worked. And Perry's super PAC spent $3.1 million in ads that apparently didn't work. Essentially, corporate front groups threw nearly $13 million into Iowa to nab just 25 delegates in the nation's first primary contest. This does not bode well for those of us who don't have a lot of money to buy elections with. But despite the massive corporate spending campaign in Iowa, the fight against too much corporate influence in our elections continues. The New York City Council approved a resolution today calling on Congress to amend the Constitution to strip out corporate personhood. New York City is now the biggest city in the nation to approve a resolution against corporate personhood and joins several other cities in America that have done the same thing, like Los Angeles, Oakland, Albany, Missoula, and Boulder, to name just a few. For more on this campaign against corporate political campaigns, I'm joined by Mark Hayes, the lead organizer of Public Citizens' Democracy is for the People campaign. That's democracyisforthepeople.org.
That's right.
And a great website. Mark, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Tom. I appreciate it.
What happened in New York City today?
Tom, it was a really exciting event. The city councilors responded to this groundswell of support that you laid out in your previous comments coming from other cities by introducing a resolution that effectively says democracy is for people, not for corporations. And the vote today really demonstrates that more and more people around the country are standing up to say that this is how they want their democracy to run. So we expect to see more of this happening throughout the weeks and months to come this spring as we and our allied organizations gear up for a whole range of actions that are going to put this effort on the map and really write the next chapter in this growing movement to challenge corporate power.
A few hours ago, earlier today, although I don't think it's played yet, I think it was pre-recorded, but I was over at Bloomberg TV News and I debated a law school professor on Citizens United.
Yeah.
And the point, and he was in favor of it. And his point was that since Citizens United, we've had the most vibrant and open elections, ever. And, more spending means more information. It's better for people. How do you respond to that?
I would say that sort of like turning the faucet full bore is a way to get a full drink of water when in fact you're going to drown yourself out. When you look at
try drinking out of this fire hose.
Exactly, exactly. That's a better, well put. When you look at the amount of money that's being spent on these elections, it's clear that what was a chronic problem of too much corporate money in politics has now become an acute problem. When we talk to people on the ground across the political map, small c conservative, populist, libertarian, Democrat, there are a lot of people out there who really feel like this decision has made their voices count even less in a democracy that many already are starting to take for granted.
When President Obama was giving his State of the Union address and he called out the Supreme Court, that was 5 of its members were sitting, as I recall, were sitting there in front of him, 5 or maybe 7, whatever. And Sam Alito said, not true, I think was what he mouthed. It struck me in that moment, I mean, this was right after the Citizens United decision in January 2010. It struck me in that moment that probably Sam Alito actually believed that, that either he was duped, because I don't think John Roberts believed that, and I don't believe for a minute that Scalia, who had been through, the 2000 election, believed that. Either he was duped or there was some vision that they had that somehow didn't get played out and we all missed. Any idea what that might be?
Tom, when I think about this, I think about the fact that the movements that we've seen that have been successful in pushing for a response to Supreme Court decisions that are at odds with where the ordinary people are at, it's actually a sterling example of how the checks and balances that our Constitution set up are there for a reason. When people like the Supreme Court Justice Alito have a genuine belief in a belief system that's at odds with the American people, they need a tool and an opportunity to restore the balance. Yeah. And so that's why our organization and others are actually pushing for constitutional remedies to this decision that'll restore that balance.
What might the unintended consequences be of overturning Citizens United, or of going full bore and saying, okay, we're going to go all the way back to the Dartmouth case in 1815, or Santa Clara County in 1886, or pick your milestone, Boston versus Bilotti, and say corporations are not people and money is not speech. Period. End of discussion. What possible bad things could come out of it?
Tom, that's a really complex question. I'm glad you asked it, and I think your work in your book and your other writing has really laid out some of those questions as well. And I think Public Citizen and the other groups we're working with are working to have a conversation with Americans about those questions. We're not letting that stand in the way of building this broader effort, because the fundamental principles that we need constitutional reform, that we need to get corporate money out of politics, are there. Now, one thing that Public Citizen thinks is a real priority is to protect the free speech rights of nonprofit organizations, which are one way in which people actually assemble to voice their values and priorities.
Citizens United itself is a nonprofit organization.
That's true, that's true. And actually, we think that by working to pass an amendment that would deal with a range of issues, from giving Congress more power to address campaign finance to addressing issues of corporate constitutional rights, you'll have a whole toolkit to ensure that those rights are protected, but also curtailed in a way that prevents nonprofits becoming a pass-through as they are now.
Yeah, well, that would be interesting. Yeah. 3 ways to deal with corporate personhood, basically. You can wait for the court composition to change. You could have Congress and the President actually exercise the power they have under Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution, which says that the Supreme Court shall operate under regulations established by Congress, as FDR tried to do, or amend the Constitution. Why are you exclusively going for the latter?
I think the work that we're doing is part of a range of efforts. So to begin with, we're pushing for some measures that would shine a spotlight on some of the new spending we're seeing with some of these super PACs, that would slow the wheels of money down a little bit by forcing corporations to disclose their spending to their shareholders and other investors. But ultimately, we need constitutional reform as a long-term solution, simply because the court's decision itself, Citizens United, actually tied our hands in many ways. It's difficult to litigate our way out of it. We've seen in past efforts to wait for the court composition to change or to mobilize enough people around that effort. That's a pretty long waiting game. We're not saying that's out of the question, but waiting for that composition to change and to be able to mobilize people around it, those are efforts that public interest groups and progressives have fought to do for a long time with mixed success. So by using the constitutional amendment effort as a flashpoint, as a rallying point for these efforts, it's really captured people's imagination.
Oh, yeah. And we did it with the 18-year-old vote in just a few months. I think it could be done with this once we hit that critical threshold.
Hope so.
Mark, thanks so much for being with us
tonight.
Thank you,
Tom.
Appreciate you dropping by.